The city at night breathes differently. By day, its streets are a river of honking cars and rushing footsteps. But once the clock slides past midnight, silence claims it like a patient tide. Neon signs hum faintly above shuttered storefronts. A stray newspaper drifts along the empty sidewalk, catching in the wind like a ghost of the day that had just died. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wails and fades, swallowed by the hush. I've grown used to that silence. It keeps me company, but it also reminds me how alone I am. There's a strange intimacy in standing at the window of my little diner, watching the wet pavement reflect the glow of traffic lights, changing for no one. The world looks abandoned, yet still alive, like the city itself can't quite fall asleep. That diner is my life now. My name is Elena Marlowe, 35 years old, recently divorced, and the sole parent of a boy who deserves far better than the scraps of energy I have left most days. I never thought I'd be here, wearing an apron until dawn, scrubbing counters under tired fluorescent lights, praying the cash in the register is enough to cover the week's bills. But survival has a way of stripping choices down to the bone. It isn't glamorous. The coffee pot groans louder than the customer some nights. Grease clings to my hair long after I've showered. Still, the diner is mine, my imperfect shield against the chaos of life outside. While others sleep, I serve plates of eggs and pancakes to cab drivers, insomniac students, and strangers who stare too long into their cups. And sometimes, I serve people who see me not as a woman running a business, but as prey. That night, they came in again. 3 of them, young, but already worn at the edges, faces hard from cheap liquor, clothes smelling of smoke, eyes hungry not for food, but for trouble. They laughed too loudly, leaning against each other as if the diner was their stage. "Pretty little thing working all alone," one said, tapping the counter with his knuckles. His grin was sharp, his teeth yellowed. "Don't you get tired of waiting on nobodies? How about you sit with us for a while?" I tightened my jaw, forcing the polite smile I'd perfected over the years. "Kitchen's closing soon. If you want food, order now." They didn't want food. One of them reached for my wrist, and in that moment the loneliness of the night became something heavier, fear pressing against my ribs. My mind screamed to pull away, to shout, but I knew too well how empty this street was after midnight. No one would come, except someone did. The scrape of a chair broke the silence. From the corner booth, he rose, a man I had noticed but never truly seen. He had been coming in for weeks, always at the same hour, ordering black coffee, never speaking more than a few words. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a presence that didn't need noise to be felt. He walked toward us with the steady rhythm of inevitability. His coat hung heavy on him, his gloves still on, as though he never intended to take root anywhere. His voice, when he spoke, was low but carved from stone. "Leave," he said. The man holding my wrist laughed, though it wavered at the edges. Or what? I barely saw it happen. A twist, a thud, the crash of a body against the counter. The others stumbled back, cursing, but his stare froze them in place. A predator's calm wrapped in silence. He didn't shout, didn't boast. He simply stood there, a wall between me and the wolves. That was when one of them paused. His bloodied lip curled into a sneer, his eyes narrowing as recognition lit his face. "You," he spat. "I know you." For a heartbeat, the diner was so quiet I could hear the buzzing of the neon sign outside. My protector said nothing, but the tightening of his jaw spoke volumes. The thug's grin widened. "My boss will want to hear about this." They retreated, slamming the door behind them, the bell jangling like a warning. I stood frozen behind the counter, my pulse a drumbeat in my ears, staring at the stranger who had shattered the silence of my lonely nights. Gratitude burned in me, but so did unease. Who was this man who fought like violence was second nature, who drank coffee in silence, and who now stood in my diner like a shadow pulled into flesh? That night, I realized the city's emptiness was not the only danger lurking after midnight. Sometimes, the silence carries secrets waiting to be spoken aloud, and I feared mine had just begun. The bell above the door stopped rattling, but my hand still trembled as I wiped down the counter. I wanted to tell myself it was over, that the night would settle back into its usual rhythm of coffee cups and soft silence. But something about the way those men had looked at him lingered in the air like smoke. The stranger sat back down in his booth as though nothing had happened. His coffee had gone cold, untouched during the chaos. He picked up the cup and drank anyway, his eyes fixed on the rain streaking down the glass. I found myself watching him in stolen glances, my body buzzing with adrenaline and unease. Gratitude pulled me toward him, but fear kept me at arm's length. When my voice finally returned, it came out too soft. "Thank you." He didn't look at me. His gloved hand tightened around the cup. "You shouldn't have to thank me for that." I wanted to ask his name. I wanted to know why he moved like someone who'd lived 1,000 fights, why the mere weight of his gaze had driven men back. But I didn't. Instead, I retreated behind the counter, clinging to the comfort of routine, wiping, stacking, pouring. The small rituals of survival. That night stretched longer than most. When I finally locked up, the sky was beginning to pale, bruised purple, giving way to early gray. Oliver was asleep in the booth, his backpack clutched to his chest like a shield. I brushed the hair off his forehead and felt a pang of guilt that my son's childhood was being measured in late nights and cold French fries. I carried him upstairs to the small apartment above the diner. The stairs creaked under our weight, and I prayed I wouldn't wake him. When I set him down on the narrow bed, he stirred, but didn't open his eyes. His lips curved into the faintest smile, the kind children save for dreams, untouched by the heaviness of the world. I stood there for a long while, watching him breathe. By the time I collapsed into my own bed, my body ached, but my mind refused to let go. I saw again the stranger's hands. Precise, unflinching, brutal. I heard the recognition in that thug's voice. "I know you." The words crawled under my skin. Who exactly had I let into my diner night after night? And why, despite the fear, did I feel safer with him there than without him? The next evening, the diner opened as usual. The neon buzzed, the fryer hissed, the smell of onions and bacon filled the air. Life has a cruel way of pretending nothing happened. The regulars trickled in, an exhausted cab driver, 2 college girls whispering over their textbooks, a woman in scrubs who ate pancakes in silence, and then him. He walked in at the same hour, the bell above the door jingling as though welcoming him home. The bruise of last night's violence had faded into the corners of the room, but it hadn't faded in me. I forced myself to act normal, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter toward him. "Still black?" His lips quirked into something almost like a smile. "Still black." I busied myself with plates and orders, but his presence filled the room like gravity. Customers came and went, their chatter rising and falling, but he remained the still point at the center of the diner. When the lull between customers came, I found myself drifting toward his booth. Maybe it was foolishness, or maybe it was loneliness, but I couldn't bear the silence anymore. "You didn't have to step in last night," I said, my hands fiddling with the rag I hadn't realized I was still holding. "It's not the first time those guys came around. Usually they just talk big and leave." His eyes lifted to mine. steady and unreadable. And if one day they don't? I swallowed. He was right, and I hated him for it. Hated how his words scraped away the fragile illusions I had built around myself. That somehow I was strong enough. That somehow I could keep danger at bay with nothing more than a sharp tongue and a locked door. My son, I started, then stopped, the word heavy on my tongue. His gaze softened almost imperceptibly. You have a boy. Oliver, I said, surprised at myself for offering the name so easily. 10. He stays upstairs when it gets too late. Something flickered across his face at that. Something I couldn't name. Regret, sadness, memory. He sipped his coffee instead of answering. I sat there longer than I meant to, words filling the space between us. Not much. Just fragments about the diner, about how I started it after the divorce, about the bills that always seemed to outrun the tips. He listened quietly, his eyes never straying, and for the first time in a long while, I felt heard. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was something more fragile, the recognition of loneliness in another person. Later that week, trouble came back in smaller doses. One of the punks showed up alone, swaggering in with a smirk stretched too wide. He ordered a burger he didn't eat, tossing bills on the counter like insults. His eyes never left me. But when he saw the stranger seated in the corner, his smirk faltered. He left before finishing his drink, muttering under his breath. That was when I realized what was happening. My diner, my tiny refuge, was becoming the center of something I didn't understand. Men were measuring each other here, sending messages without words, and at the heart of it was him. One night, as I closed up, I found him waiting outside. The street was empty, washed in the glow of a flickering street lamp. You should be careful, he said. I crossed my arms, though my pulse quickened. That's rich coming from you. Who are you exactly? Why do they look at you like that? For the first time, I saw hesitation in his eyes. He looked past me, toward the diner, toward the windows where the light still spilled into the night. Someone I don't want to be anymore. And with that, he walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers, and a gnawing certainty that the silence of the city was about to be broken. The city has a way of pretending everything is fine until it isn't. Streetlights hum, taxis pass, neon flickers, but underneath the glow, something darker waits. I felt it every time the diner bell rang. Every face that stepped inside carried a question I couldn't answer. Are you here for me or for him? For days after that night, nothing happened. The regulars came and went. Students buried themselves in textbooks. Cab drivers wolfed down sandwiches. Insomniacs stared at empty cups like prophets reading omens. Life at the diner returned to its fragile rhythm, but the silence was heavier, as if holding its breath. He kept coming, always at the same hour, always black coffee. Sometimes he read the newspaper, though I wondered if his eyes ever really saw the words. Other times he just sat, watching the street like he was waiting for something to walk out of the shadows. Oliver noticed him too. Who's that guy? He asked one night, his voice muffled around a French fry. He sat in his usual spot, the back booth, backpack spilling notebooks and pencils across the seat. A customer, I said too quickly. Oliver grinned, sly in the way only 10-year-olds can be. Mom, you look at him like he's not just a customer. I nearly dropped the plate in my hands. Eat your fries. But inside I wondered if he was right. It wasn't attraction, not exactly. It was gravity, the way he carried himself, the way danger bent around him, the way he made the diner feel both safer and more dangerous at once. That week, trouble didn't come through the door. It waited outside. Twice I found cigarette butts ground into the pavement near the entrance, though no one had been smoking there when I looked. Once, the lock on the back door stuck, like someone had tested it. Small things, but they gnawed at me. And then one night, the men came back. There were 5 of them this time. They didn't slink in drunk and sloppy. They came with purpose, their eyes sharp, their movements too coordinated for street thugs. The air shifted when they entered, heavy and electric. Customers froze mid-bite, the chatter of forks against plates fading into silence. I felt my stomach drop. He was already there, sitting in his booth, his cup half empty. He didn't move at first. He just looked up, and I saw the change in him, the way his stillness hardened into something lethal. The leader stepped forward, a tall man with a shaved head and a scar, splitting his eyebrow. He didn't look at me. He looked directly at the man in the booth. "Well," he said, his voice smooth and venomous, "look who crawled out of the grave." My protector didn't answer. He set his cup down carefully, as though every second he delayed was a choice. "You think you can hide in a place like this?" the scarred man sneered. "You should have stayed gone. My boss has been waiting for a chance like this." The words slid into me like ice. Boss, waiting, recognition. These men weren't here for me. They were here for him. But by being here, by letting him into my world, I had become part of it. Oliver shifted in the booth behind me, his small voice trembling. "Mom?" Panic jolted through me. My son, he couldn't be here for this. I grabbed his hand and pushed him toward the kitchen, whispering, "Stay down, don't come out." His eyes widened, but he obeyed, disappearing behind the swinging door. When I turned back, the men had spread across the diner like storm clouds. My protector finally rose, his shadow filling the room. He stood tall, shoulders squared, his expression unreadable. "Tell your boss," he said quietly. "If he wants me, he knows where to find me." The leader laughed, but it was humorless. "Oh, he'll find you, and we'll make sure she pays for standing near you." His eyes flicked toward me, and in that moment, I understood the danger in its rawest form. It wasn't just his past. It was my future now. The men left, but their promise hung in the air. The bell over the door didn't sound like an ending this time. It sounded like the opening shot of a war. After they were gone, I locked the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. I turned to him, my voice breaking. What did they mean? Who are you? He looked at me for a long time, his silence louder than any answer. Finally he spoke, voice low, heavy with regret. "Someone I tried to stop being. But pasts don't stay buried, Elena. They dig themselves back up." Hearing my name in his mouth startled me. I hadn't told him. I wanted to scream, to demand explanations, but Oliver's small face peeked out from the kitchen, his eyes wide and scared. My son, my anchor, the reason I couldn't afford the luxury of falling apart. So I swallowed my fear, shoved it down with the bitterness of coffee and grease, and told myself I could still control this, that I could keep my diner, my boy, my fragile little life intact. But deep down, I knew the truth. The night wasn't just mine anymore. The morning after felt like waking up in someone else's life. The city outside my window went about its usual routine, delivery trucks rattling down the street, neighbors hurrying to work, the faint smell of fresh bread drifting from the bakery on the corner. But none of it touched me. My world had shifted overnight, and I couldn't force it back into place. Oliver sat at the kitchen table in his pajamas, hunched over a bowl of cereal, humming quietly to himself. His presence grounded me, pulled me back from the storm. I brushed his hair back with my hand, and he leaned into it, as if reminding me that no matter what shadows pressed against our door, he was still here, still my boy. "Are those men going to come back?" he asked suddenly, his spoon clinking against the bowl. The question sliced through me. I wanted to lie, to plaster reassurance over his worry, but the image of the scarred man's sneer wouldn't leave me. "No," I said softly. "Not if I can help it." He frowned, but nodded, trusting me in the way children trust their parents to hold up the sky. I wished I believed my own words. That night, when I unlocked the diner, I half expected to see them waiting. Instead, the street was quiet, washed in neon and drizzle. My heart didn't calm, though. Silence no longer felt like safety. It felt like anticipation. And then he came. He walked in as though nothing had changed, his coat damp from the rain, his gloves still on. He took his usual seat, and for a long moment, we just stared at each other across the diner's worn linoleum. I brought him his coffee without asking. My hand shook as I set it down, and he noticed. "You shouldn't be afraid of me," he said quietly. "I'm not," I lied. His eyes narrowed, like he could see through the flimsy shield of my words. "But you are afraid of what follows me." I sank into the booth across from him before I could talk myself out of it. "Then tell me. Tell me why those men looked at you like you were a ghost risen from the grave. Tell me why one of them said his boss had been waiting for this." For a long time, he didn't answer. He traced the rim of his cup with his gloved thumb, staring into the black liquid as if it held absolution. Finally, he spoke. "My name isn't important. Not yet. What matters is that years ago, I was someone you would have crossed the street to avoid. Someone men feared, and for good reason." The air between us thickened. "I walked away from it," he continued. "I buried it, or I thought I did, but men like that," he gestured toward the memory of last night's intruders. "They never forget. To them, debts don't expire. Blood doesn't wash away." I should have stood up and walked away. I should have told him never to come back, but instead I sat there, my heart a frantic bird in my chest, and whispered, "Why here? Why my diner?" His gaze lifted to mine, steady and unflinching, because it was the first place in years where I felt human, where I could sit with a cup of coffee and almost believe I was just another man. The confession pulled something deep inside me, something I didn't want to name. I saw not just danger, but longing, and for one reckless second, I imagined what it would be like if his words were true, if he really could leave the darkness behind. But then the bell above the door rang, shattering the moment. 2 men walked in, strangers, at least to me. They took a booth at the far end, ordered nothing, and sat with their eyes on us. The tension in the room snapped taut. He didn't look at them. He didn't have to. His whole body changed, shoulders tightening, jaw hardening. The mask of calm he wore so easily began to crack. "They're watching," I whispered. "Yes." "And they'll come back?" "Yes." My throat tightened. "Then what happens to me? To my son?" His eyes softened, just for an instant. "I won't let them touch you." The words should have comforted me, but instead they terrified me more, because protection from a man like him didn't come without cost. Later that night, after the strangers left without a word, I closed up the diner and found him waiting outside again. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and shining under the street lamps. "You should think about leaving," he said, "at least until this passes." I laughed, a bitter sound. "Leave? This diner is all I have. Where would I go? And what about Oliver? He has school, friends, a life. I can't just disappear." He looked at me then, really looked, like he was trying to measure the weight of my resolve. "Then you need to understand, if you stay, you're not just running a diner anymore. You're standing in the middle of a war you didn't start." The thought chilled me, but I held his gaze. "And you? What are you standing in the middle of?" He didn't answer, not with words. He just slipped his hands into his coat pockets and walked away, his shadow stretching long behind him. I watched until he disappeared into the darkness, my heart torn between fear and something far more dangerous. Hope. That night, I barely slept. The city outside was restless, and so was I. My life had been a fragile balancing act. Bills, work, parenting, survival. Now, someone else's past was threatening to topple it all. And yet, when I closed my eyes, I didn't dream of the men who wanted revenge. I dreamed of him, sitting in that booth with his coffee, looking at me like I was the last piece of normal left in his world. The week that followed was a blur of sleepless nights and nervous glances over my shoulder. Every ring of the diner bell made my stomach twist. Every face that lingered too long set my nerves on fire. It was as though the city had turned into a chessboard, and I couldn't tell who the pieces belonged to anymore. Oliver noticed. Children always notice. "You keep looking out the window," he said one night, crunching on potato chips as if he were stating the weather. "Are you waiting for someone?" I forced a smile. "Just making sure everything's okay." He tilted his head, studying me with the kind of perceptiveness that made me ache. "Is it about that man? The one who drinks coffee all the time?" I almost choked on my own breath. "Why would you say that?" "Because he looks at you like Dad used to," Oliver said simply, and returned to his chips. The words hit harder than any threat. I had spent years patching over the holes my divorce had left behind, years convincing myself I didn't need anyone else. And now, my son saw through me in an instant. The man, my protector, my enigma, came later that night. He looked the same as always. Coat, gloves, a quiet gravity that seemed to darken the air around him. But when our eyes met, I saw something new. Weariness. A kind of heaviness that no amount of coffee could lift. I brought him his cup and slid into the booth across from him before my courage could falter. "Why me?" I asked. He raised a brow. "Why this diner? Why protect me? You could have stayed in the shadows. You didn't have to step in that night." His jaw flexed. For a long time he said nothing. Then, slowly, he pulled off one glove. His hand was scarred, knuckles thickened, skin rough from years of fighting. He placed it flat on the table, as if showing me a map of his past. "Because I've spent too many years destroying," he said quietly. "And the first night I walked in here, you looked at me like I wasn't a monster, like I was just a man having coffee." I stared at his hand, the weight of his words pressing against my chest. I wanted to believe him, but doubt clawed at me. "What did you destroy?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. His eyes hardened. "Things you don't want to know. Families torn apart. Blood spilled because I ordered it. A kingdom built on fear, and a graveyard left behind when I walked away." I felt my breath catch. My mind screamed, "Run," but my body didn't move. Because beneath the horror of his confession was something else. Truth. Raw, unvarnished truth. "And now?" I whispered. "Now I'm trying to live like none of that ever happened. But the past doesn't forgive. It hunts, and it's found me again." The diner's neon light flickered above us, buzzing like a restless insect. For a moment, I felt trapped in its glow, caught between two impossible choices. Trust a man who carried the weight of blood on his hands, or turn him away and risk the fury of those already circling us. "You're putting me and my son in danger," I said, my voice trembling. His gaze softened at the mention of Oliver. "I would never let harm touch him, or you." I wanted to believe him. God help me, I wanted to. But trust isn't a switch you flip. It's a slow build, a fragile bridge over deep water. And I wasn't sure if his weight, or mine, could hold. 2 nights later, the danger made itself known again. A brick crashed through the front window just after midnight, glass shattering across the floor. The note tied to it was short and brutal: "Leave or bleed." I swept up the shards with shaking hands, Oliver wide-eyed in the booth. Before I could even tape a plastic sheet over the broken glass, he was there, my protector, his jaw tight, his eyes like steel. "This is only the beginning," he said. I slammed the broom down harder than I meant to. "Then end it. Do something. If you're as dangerous as they say, if you used to be who they think you are, then stop them." His silence was worse than shouting. Finally, he said, "I can't. Not without becoming him again." The weight of those words filled the diner, pressing against the walls until I thought I'd suffocate. I wanted to scream, to demand he fix the mess his past had dragged into my life. But Oliver's small voice cut through the tension. "Mom," he whispered, his eyes brimming with fear. "Are we safe?" I knelt beside him, holding him close, my throat tight. "Yes, baby, you're safe. I promise." But as I felt his heart racing against mine, I knew promises weren't enough. Later, when the diner was empty and Oliver asleep upstairs, the man lingered by the shattered window. His reflection wavered in the glass shards like a fractured ghost. "I don't deserve this," he murmured. "Don't deserve what?" I asked. "Peace. A second chance. You." I didn't answer. I couldn't, because in that moment I realized the truth. I was already tangled in his past, whether I wanted to be or not. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to untangle myself. Life doesn't pause for danger. The bills still arrive in their envelopes, the rent still ticks closer every month, and Oliver still needs clean clothes and help with fractions he swears will never matter in the real world. The ordinary presses forward, even when shadows lurk at the door. That week, I tried to drown myself in the ordinary. I cooked double batches of chili, wiped the counters until the laminate shone, and forced myself to laugh at Oliver's jokes about how the diner's pancakes could probably survive a nuclear war. But the cracks showed. Every time the bell above the door jingled, my shoulders tensed. Every time footsteps echoed outside, I held my breath. And then there was him. He kept coming, always at the same hour, as though he were tethered to this place. But something shifted between us. Maybe it was the brick through the window. Maybe it was the confession he had spilled across the table like blood. Whatever it was, I found myself speaking to him more, not less. One night, when the diner was nearly empty, he noticed me struggling with a stubborn shelf in the pantry. Without a word, he slipped off his coat, set his gloves aside, and joined me. His scarred hands lifted the heavy box of canned tomatoes as though it weighed nothing. "You don't have to," I said, watching the muscles in his forearms tense. "I know," he replied, "but I want to." It was such a simple thing, stacking cans, adjusting jars, but it carried a weight that startled me. My ex-husband had never once set foot in this pantry, never cared how many hours I spent keeping the diner afloat. And here was this man, whose past was soaked in violence, crouched beside me to fix a crooked shelf. Later, Oliver wandered in, rubbing sleep from his eyes. When he saw the man in the pantry, he froze, his small body rigid. "It's okay," I said gently, resting a hand on my son's shoulder. "He's helping." Oliver frowned, but his voice was curious more than afraid. "Do you even have a name?" The man's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Call me Marcus." I looked at him sharply. He'd never offered his name before, not even to me. Was it real or just a mask? Still, Oliver seemed satisfied. He nodded once and shuffled back upstairs, mumbling about math homework. When the door closed behind him, Marcus exhaled. "I shouldn't have done that." "Given him a name?" He nodded. "Names are dangerous. They make things real." I met his eyes. Maybe that's the point. The next few days unfolded in small, surprising ways. Marcus fixed the flickering light above the counter, his large hands clumsy with the delicate wires. He carried crates of soda into the back room. One night, when the diner was empty, he even tried to cook. I still laugh remembering it. He stood at the griddle, frowning as he flipped a pancake that promptly folded in on itself like a dying flower. "Not bad," I teased, leaning against the counter. "Don't lie," he muttered, glaring at the ruined pancake. "I've handled explosives more delicate than this." I burst out laughing, the sound startling even me. I hadn't laughed like that in years. Loud, unguarded, with no one to apologize to. He looked at me then, really looked, and I felt the shift, like a current pulling me under. For one dangerous moment, the diner wasn't filled with fear or shadows or the threat of men lurking outside. It was just me and him, two broken people sharing a laugh over a ruined pancake. But peace doesn't last. That Friday, as I closed up, I spotted a car parked across the street. The same car had been there 3 nights in a row, engine idling, lights off. I couldn't see who was inside, but I didn't need to. My blood knew. Marcus saw it too. His body stiffened, his jaw tightening. He walked me upstairs to the apartment, his steps silent but heavy with tension. At the door, he paused. They're watching now, waiting. I swallowed hard. For what? For me to slip, for you to run, for a moment they can use. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him to leave so their eyes would follow him and not me. But instead I found myself whispering, "Then don't slip." His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw fear there, not for himself, but for me. "I'll protect you," he said softly. "But, Elena, protection comes with a price. Are you ready for that?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because the truth was already carved into me. Somewhere between coffee cups and shattered glass, I had already chosen. That night, as I lay beside Oliver, listening to his steady breathing, my thoughts tangled. I should have been terrified, and I was. But beneath the fear was something worse, longing. Longing for the safety Marcus offered, longing for the way he made the world's weight feel just a little lighter, longing for the impossible chance that maybe, just maybe, he could leave his past behind, and I could believe in love again. The city hummed outside, restless and endless, neon bleeding into darkness, and I knew, as surely as I knew my own name, that the storm was only beginning. The following week, the city's silence stopped feeling like silence. It felt like breath being held, like a trap waiting to spring. The car that had idled across the street stopped appearing, but I knew better than to trust absence. Danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply waits, patient and hungry. Marcus was different too. He still came every night, still sat in his corner booth, but the calm he wore like armor began to crack. His eyes tracked every movement in the diner, every stranger who lingered too long, every shadow shifting outside. He was a man haunted, and I lived inside his haunting. Oliver noticed, of course. He always noticed. "Why does he always sit in the same spot?" he asked one evening, chewing on a grilled cheese sandwich. "And why does he watch the door like that?" "Because he likes routine," I said too quickly. Oliver tilted his head, studying Marcus with the seriousness only a child could carry. "He looks like someone who's waiting for a fight." I opened my mouth to reply, but the diner door slammed open before I could. They were back. Not the same 3 drunks as before. This time there were 4 men. Cleaner, sharper, their eyes cold instead of glazed with liquor. They carried themselves differently, not as troublemakers looking for fun, but as predators on a mission. The bell above the door jangled, but no one laughed. The air thickened. Marcus stood before I even breathed his name. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with tattoos crawling up his neck, smirked when he saw him. "Marcus," he drawled, savoring the name like poison. "Didn't think we'd find you hiding behind a waitress and her kid." My blood froze. They knew. They knew about me, about Oliver. Marcus's voice was steady, almost too calm. "This isn't your ground. Leave." The man's grin widened. "Our boss says hello. Says you should have stayed in the dirt where you belong. But since you didn't," his eyes flicked to me, "we'll take pleasure reminding you of the cost." I felt Oliver's hand clutch mine under the counter. His small fingers trembled, and for a moment I hated Marcus. Not for who he was, but for bringing this into our lives. The standoff stretched, the diner thick with tension. Then, just as suddenly as they had come, the men backed toward the door, laughing under their breath. "Not tonight," the leader said, "but soon. You can't sit here forever, Marcus." They left, the bell jingling like mockery. My knees nearly buckled when the door shut. Oliver pressed his face into my side, his voice muffled. "Mom, I'm scared." I wrapped my arms around him, whispering the same empty promise I always did. "You're safe. I've got you." But my heart hammered with the knowledge that I couldn't keep him safe, not from this. Later, after I put Oliver to bed upstairs, I found Marcus still sitting in the booth, his hands clenched into fists on the table. He looked less like a man and more like a caged animal, pacing inside himself. "They'll be back," I said softly. He nodded once. "Then what? What happens when they come and they don't just leave? When they decide to make good on their threats?" His eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time I saw it. Fear. Not for himself, but for me. "I'll end it before it gets that far," he said. "And what does that mean?" Silence. His silence was worse than any admission. I sank into the seat across from him, exhaustion pressing down on me. "You can't keep living like this, watching doors, waiting for shadows, and you can't drag me and my son into it. We didn't choose this war." "I didn't choose it either," he said, his voice breaking for the first time. "But it doesn't matter. It chose me." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The neon light above us flickered, buzzing like an anxious heart. Outside, the city exhaled in restless silence. Finally, Marcus whispered, almost to himself, "I don't want to lose this." "What?" I asked. "This place. You. The chance to feel like I can be more than what I was." My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to believe him, to reach across the table and close the distance between us. Another part screamed to lock the doors, shut him out, and protect Oliver from the storm he carried on his back. But when his eyes met mine, I knew it was already too late. I was caught in the current, pulled toward him, whether I wanted to be or not. That night I dreamt of broken glass and shadowed men, but also of Marcus's hand reaching for mine across the diner table. And when I woke with Oliver curled beside me, I knew two things. The danger was no longer circling. It was coming. And no matter how hard I tried, my heart was already choosing him. The days blurred into each other, each one carrying a heavier weight than the last. I moved through them with a strange kind of hyper-awareness, listening for footsteps in the alley, watching the windows for shadows that lingered too long, tensing every time the diner bell chimed. Even Oliver felt it. He stopped asking why I checked the locks 3 times before bed. He just watched me with wide eyes. The trust of childhood mingled with the worry of someone growing up too fast. The car returned, different models, different colors, but always parked across the street at night, engines idling, lights dark. Marcus noticed too. His eyes would flick to the glass whenever headlights swept by. He didn't need to say anything. I knew what it meant. They were circling, tightening the noose. One evening, As I carried a tray of dishes back to the kitchen, I heard the scrape of a chair. When I returned, Marcus was standing in the middle of the diner, his back to me, his entire frame coiled with tension. "What is it?" I whispered. He tilted his head toward the window. Across the street, 3 men leaned against a lamppost, smoking, their faces half hidden by hoods. Their eyes were fixed on the diner. "They're sending a message," Marcus said quietly. "They want me to know they're watching. They want you to see it too." Fear shot through me, sharp and cold. "Then what do we do?" His jaw tightened. "We wait." The word felt like a death sentence. That night, after I put Oliver to bed, Marcus stayed behind to help close up. He moved through the diner with an ease that unsettled me, like he belonged there, like he had already woven himself into the fabric of my life. When the last light clicked off and only the neon glow remained, he leaned against the counter, his expression unreadable. "You should send Oliver away for a while," he said. My stomach dropped. "What? No, absolutely not. Elena, he's my son. I'm not shipping him off because of your past. This is his home, our home." His eyes darkened, not with anger, but with something heavier. "If anything happens, then it happens to me," I cut in. My voice shook, but I didn't back down. "I won't let him think I abandoned him, not for a second. If you're looking for someone willing to sacrifice their child's sense of safety, you've come to the wrong woman." For the first time, Marcus looked undone. He scrubbed a hand over his face, scar catching in the glow. "You're braver than you should be, and you're softer than you want to be," I shot back. The silence between us thickened, heavy with truths neither of us dared to name. Then, slowly, he reached across the counter. His hand hovered there, open, waiting. I hesitated. My heart pounded, my body torn between instinct and desire. Finally, I placed my hand in his. His skin was rough, scarred, but his touch was gentle. Too gentle for a man who claimed to have blood on his hands. "I'll keep you safe," he said softly, "even if it kills me." I wanted to tell him not to say things like that. I wanted to tell him he had no right to tie his fate to mine. But instead, I held on tighter. The next day, the trap was sprung. It began with a phone call. The diner's landline rang just after opening, its shrill tones slicing through the quiet. I lifted the receiver, expecting a supplier or maybe a wrong number. "Pretty place you've got there," a voice drawled, male, smooth, with a cruelty beneath the words. "Would be a shame if something happened to it." My throat went dry. "Who is this?" The man chuckled. "Tell Marcus the past says hello." The line went dead. My knees weakened. I gripped the counter to keep from collapsing. Marcus looked up from his booth, already knowing. He didn't need to ask what the call was about. He saw it in my face. "They're tightening the circle," he said grimly. "Next time, they won't just watch. They'll move." That night, the diner felt less like a place of refuge and more like a cage. Every sound made me flinch. The clatter of silverware, the creak of the door, even Oliver's laughter from the back booth. Shadows stretched long across the floor, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something I couldn't stop. Marcus stayed until closing, his presence a shield, but also a reminder of the storm he carried. When the last customer left, he locked the door himself and turned to me. "They'll come soon, maybe tomorrow, maybe the night after, but they will come." I swallowed hard, my voice breaking. "And what happens then?" His eyes met mine, steady and unflinching. "Then I do what I swore I wouldn't. I become him again." I should have pulled away. I should have told him I wanted no part of this. But instead I stepped closer, the fear and the pull tangled into one, And for the first time, standing there in the glow of neon and shadows, I let myself wonder, if love could grow in the middle of this darkness, what kind of cost would it demand? The trap came on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were usually quiet. Students too broke to eat out, drivers catching up on sleep, the city half asleep between the chaos of Monday and the release of Friday. I almost let myself relax that night. Almost. The diner was empty except for Oliver in the back booth, sketching superheroes in his notebook, and Marcus in his usual spot, his coffee untouched, his eyes on the street. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the world outside into smeared neon. Then, the bell above the door rang. 3 men walked in. Not the loud, swaggering kind, but silent, sharp. Their clothes were too clean, their shoes too polished. They spread out, one to the counter, one to the booth near Oliver, one leaning against the wall like he owned the place. My stomach turned to stone. "Kitchen's closing soon," I said, my voice steady only because I'd practiced it for years. The man at the counter smiled, all teeth, no warmth. "We're not here to eat." Marcus stood. His chair scraped against the floor, loud in the hush. "Leave." The man's smile widened. "Always the same line, Marcus. You're out of practice." Oliver froze, his pencil dropping onto the table. His eyes darted from me to Marcus, confusion laced with fear. "Don't look at them," I whispered, moving quickly to stand between my son and the man near his booth. My hands trembled, but I held my ground. The man at the counter tilted his head, studying me. "So this is the little family you've built. Cute. Temporary." Rage surged through me, sharp and unexpected. "Get out," he chuckled, slow and deliberate. "Or what? He'll protect you?" He jerked his chin toward Marcus. We both know what happens when Marcus protects people. They end up buried. Marcus moved then. Too fast, too precise. In a blink, the man near Oliver was on the floor, his arm twisted behind his back, his face pressed to the linoleum. The others lunged, and the diner erupted into chaos. Chairs toppled, glass shattered. Oliver screamed, his small hands clapped over his ears. I grabbed him, pulling him against me, my heart a drumbeat of terror. Marcus fought like the man he swore he'd left behind. Every motion was brutal efficiency. No wasted effort, no hesitation. One man crashed into the counter, another slammed into the wall. The third bolted for the door, limping, clutching his ribs. When the last of them stumbled out into the rain, the diner was a ruin of broken glass and overturned tables. My breath came in shallow gasps, Oliver's tears soaking into my shirt. Marcus stood in the wreckage, chest heaving, blood on his knuckles. For the first time I saw him not as the quiet man with the coffee, but as the war he carried in his bones. He looked at me, eyes burning with something between fury and despair. "This is what I am," he said, voice raw. "This is what follows me. Do you see now?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him I hated him for dragging this into my world, for letting Oliver see violence up close, for proving every fear I had was true. But when I opened my mouth, what came out was softer, more dangerous. "I see you." His face twisted, torn between relief and pain. He shook his head. You shouldn't look at me at all." But I did, and I couldn't stop. Later, after Oliver cried himself to sleep upstairs, I sat alone in the diner, sweeping glass into piles with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Marcus stood by the door, silent, his shadow stretched across the floor like a wound. Finally, I broke the silence. "They'll come back." "Yes. And next time, they won't just want you. They'll want me and my son." He closed his eyes, as if the truth of my words was a knife. "I won't let that happen." "But you can't promise that," I whispered. His eyes opened, steel gray and unflinching. "No. but I can promise they'll go through me first. The weight of that promise settled between us, heavy and terrifying. And yet, beneath the fear, a flicker of something else stirred. A fragile, reckless hope that maybe protection could be more than violence. Maybe it could be love. But love, like violence, has its price. And I feared mine was coming due. The night of the reckoning came with no warning. It was late, later than usual. The streets outside were empty, slick with recent rain, neon reflections rippling in the puddles. Oliver had fallen asleep in the booth, with his head on his backpack, and the diner was hushed. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of rain on glass. Then the bell above the door screamed. They poured in. 6 men, maybe 7. I lost count the moment the first one kicked over a chair, and the crash jolted Oliver awake. Their boots thundered against the floor, their eyes sharp, their faces cruelly amused. And behind them came a man I hadn't seen before, older, broader. His presence sucked the air out of the room. The leader, the one Marcus had been waiting for. "Well," he drawled, surveying the diner with mock admiration. "So this is where the great Marcus hides. A coffee shop? With a waitress and her brat?" My blood turned to ice. He knew. He knew exactly who we were. Marcus rose slowly from his booth, each movement deliberate, his body taut as a drawn bow. "Leave them out of this," he said, his voice calm, but the kind of calm that hides fire. The man laughed, low and sharp. "You don't get to make demands anymore. You took everything from me years ago. Tonight, I take it back. With interest." His eyes slid to me. Pretty interest. Something primal roared in Marcus's face then, a fury I had only glimpsed before. He stepped forward, blocking me and Oliver with his body. "Touch her, and you won't leave this place alive." And then it began. The diner erupted into chaos. Men lunged, fists flying, chairs toppling, glass shattering. Marcus met them head on, a storm unleashed. He moved with terrifying precision. Every punch, every strike, a brutal echo of the man he once had been. I shoved Oliver beneath the counter, my heart hammering, my body a fragile barrier between him and the violence crashing around us. His small fingers dug into my arm. "Mom!" "It's okay, baby, stay down," I lied, though nothing was okay. I peeked over the counter and saw Marcus take on 2 men at once, his movements a blur, his knuckles bloodied. He was winning, but they were too many. The leader stood back, watching with cold satisfaction, as though he knew all he had to do was wait until Marcus broke. One of the men grabbed a broken bottle and lunged. I screamed, too late. Marcus turned, deflected, but not cleanly. The glass sliced across his side, and he staggered, blood blooming dark against his shirt. My breath caught. For a heartbeat, time froze. Marcus clutched his side, his face pale but unyielding. He straightened, eyes blazing, and launched himself back into the fight with a snarl that rattled the walls. I couldn't stay behind the counter anymore. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a skillet from the kitchen, and swung it with all the fear and fury in me at the man creeping toward Oliver. The clang rang through the diner, and the man dropped, stunned. My arms shook, but I stood over him, shielding my son. Marcus glanced at me, surprise flashing in his eyes, even as he fought. For an instant, amid the chaos, something passed between us, a recognition, a promise. We were in this together. The battle raged until only the leader remained, standing in the wreckage of his men. He looked at Marcus, who was bleeding, staggering, but still upright. "This isn't over," the man spat, his voice dripping venom. "You can't erase who you are. You'll always be ours." And with that, he slipped into the rain, leaving the diner shattered, leaving us gasping in the ruins. Marcus collapsed against the counter, blood soaking through his shirt. I rushed to him, my hands pressing against the wound, tears burning down my face. "You're hurt," I whispered. You're hurt so badly." His hand closed weakly over mine, his eyes locking on mine with fierce intensity. "As long as you and Oliver are alive, it's worth it." I shook my head, choking on sobs. "Don't you dare say that. Don't you dare act like you're disposable." His lips curved, faint and pained. "You make me wish I wasn't." And there, in the wreckage of my diner, with blood and glass around us, I realized the most terrifying truth of all. I couldn't imagine a life without him anymore. The diner smelled of blood and burnt grease. Broken glass glittered across the floor like cruel confetti. The neon sign outside flickered weakly, casting everything in fractured red and blue, as if even the city didn't know whether to stop or go. I pressed harder on Marcus's wound, my hands sticky, my breath ragged. He winced but didn't pull away. Oliver crouched beside me, pale and trembling, his wide eyes darting between Marcus's face and mine. "Mom, is he going to die?" The question cut deeper than the knife wound ever could. I forced my voice steady, even as tears blurred my vision. "No, baby, he's not going anywhere." Marcus's lips curved faintly, though his skin was ashen. "Don't make promises you can't keep." I shot him a glare, fury rising through the fear. "Shut up. Don't you dare give up on me. On us." Something flickered in his eyes then, something soft, something raw. He reached up with a trembling hand, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You don't understand, Elena. If I stay, more will come. They won't stop. They'll keep coming until there's nothing left standing." "Then we fight them," I snapped, surprising even myself. "We fight them together." His hand dropped. He shook his head slowly, pain twisting his features. "You don't know what that means. You've seen glimpses, but if I let myself become who I was again, there won't be anything left of the man you think you see." The words carved through me, jagged and merciless. He wasn't wrong. I had seen it in his eyes, in the way his fists moved like weapons, in the way bodies crumpled under his blows. Marcus wasn't just a man who used to belong to the darkness. He was the darkness, caged and waiting. But then I thought of the little moments, the crooked shelf he fixed, the pancake he ruined, the way he looked at Oliver like he was something precious instead of a burden. That wasn't darkness. That was light fighting its way through cracks. "You're more than what you were," I whispered. "Don't you dare tell me otherwise." He looked away, his jaw tight. "I can't risk you. Or him." Oliver tugged at my sleeve then, his voice small but firm. "Don't go." The silence that followed was heavier than the wreckage around us. Marcus stared at my son, at the boy who had lost one father already, at the child who clung to him with a trust that defied logic. I saw the war in his eyes, the urge to protect by leaving, and the impossible pull to stay. Finally, he pushed himself upright, swaying. "I need to disappear for a while. Let things cool down. If they think I'm gone, maybe they'll stop circling you." "No," I said sharply, standing to face him. "You walk out that door, you don't come back. I've survived men who left before Marcus. I won't survive another." His face crumpled, the mask slipping for the briefest moment. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint mix of rain and blood clinging to him. "You deserve peace," he said softly, "and I'll never be peace." My heart ached with the weight of it. "Maybe not, but you're the only thing that makes me feel alive again." The words hung there, dangerous and uncontainable. For a moment I thought he'd kiss me, that he'd throw caution into the storm and pull me into the fire with him. But instead he staggered back, his fists clenched. "I'll be back," he promised, though his voice broke on the words. "If I make it out of this, I'll come back. But if I stay now, You'll both be swallowed with me." And before I could stop him, before I could find the words to hold him in place, he turned and walked out into the rain. The bell above the door chimed once, soft and final, like the closing note of a song I wasn't ready to end. I stood frozen in the wreckage, Oliver's hand gripping mine, my chest hollow and burning. The city outside swallowed Marcus whole, and I was left with only silence. But even as the fear gnawed at me, another truth burned brighter. I had already chosen him. Whether he returned or not, my life would never be the same. The diner never really recovered from that night. I swept the glass, patched the window, scrubbed the blood from the tiles, but some stains don't come out. Every time I unlocked the door, I half expected the shadows to rush back in, and Marcus was gone. Days passed, then weeks. The booth in the corner stayed empty, a ghost of itself. Some nights, I found myself pouring coffee for no one, leaving it to cool in the cup until the steam faded. Oliver asked about him once or twice, but when he saw the way my face folded in on itself, he stopped. Children know when to let silence carry the answer, but life, stubborn as ever, moved on. Bills still came. School forms still needed signing. The diner filled again with cab drivers, students, night shift workers. The neon hummed, the griddle hissed, and I learned how to keep breathing without looking for him in every passing shadow. I told myself it was better this way. Safer, cleaner. But late at night, when Oliver was asleep and the city's heartbeat slowed, I felt the truth. Safer didn't mean alive. It meant numb. And I had been numb for too many years already. It was raining again the night he returned. The bell over the door chimed, and there he was, wet, bruised, but standing. My heart stuttered in my chest. For a moment, I thought I had conjured him out of loneliness. He didn't sit this time. He walked straight to the counter, his eyes finding mine with a steadiness that shook me. "Are you going to yell at me?" he asked, voice rough but edged with something like hope. I set down the rag in my hand, my throat too tight to speak. "Elena," he said, my name breaking in his mouth. "It's done. They won't be coming back. I made sure of it." I should have demanded details, demanded proof. I should have asked what lines he had crossed to give me this fragile peace. But all I could do was stare at him, at the man who had torn my life open and stitched it back together with his scars. Oliver's footsteps padded down the stairs then. He blinked at Marcus, rubbed his eyes, and whispered, "You came back." Marcus crouched, pain flickering across his face as he did. "I told you I would." My son studied him for a long moment, then nodded once, as if satisfied, and shuffled toward the kitchen for a midnight snack. And just like that, it was us again. Later, when the diner was empty and Oliver asleep, Marcus sat in his old booth, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. I slid into the seat across from him, the way I had the first night he spoke truth to me. "You could have stayed gone," I said softly. His eyes met mine, steady and tired. "I didn't want to. Not anymore." Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't heavy. It was something else, something fragile and tentative, like dawn breaking after too long in the dark. "Are we safe now?" I asked. "As safe as we'll ever be," he replied. "But safety isn't the same as living, Elena. If you let me, I want to try. I want to live. With you." My chest ached with 1,000 answers, but only one found its way out. "Then don't disappear again." His lips curved into the smallest smile, the kind that carried both pain and promise. "I'll try." The city outside pulsed with its endless rhythm, sirens, rain, neon. But inside the diner, for the first time in months, I felt something steady, Not perfect, not guaranteed, but real. And as I sat across from Marcus, listening to the hum of the neon and the slow drip of coffee, I realized something. Life would always carry danger, loss, and uncertainty, but it could also carry love, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough.